This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Welcome back to the show. We are honored to have Betty Jackson here joining us, our psychotherapist and certified Sandplay therapist, and really ecstatic to get to know her. She hails from beautiful Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and we're going to talk today about, what she does and how she's helping so many people attain goals that maybe parents and children both didn't know were possible. So I'm excited to learn more about Sandplay, to learn more about you, and of course, all that you're doing with psychotherapy to help people in general. Hi, Betty. How are you?
Um, Thank you. I'm fine, and I'm excited to be here, and always excited to talk about Sandplay.
Beautiful. Well, let's talk a little bit about what Sandplay is to start, if you don't mind. Just a little background.
Well, Sandplay is a very unique psychotherapeutic modality. Unique in that it can be completely nonverbal. It doesn't have to be, but it has that possibility. And in Sandplay, the client is offered a sand tray, a containing vessel with either dry or wet sand. They are able to choose. And then they can also select from a range of miniatures from the Sandplay collection. Um, Let me give just a little cursory tour so you can see a visual of a little bit of a Sandplay collection.
Yep,
So
I noticed the penguins first behind you, but oh my goodness, what types of
sitting around here on these shelves under the windowsill, we've got all kinds of religious and mythological symbols,
oh,
um,
wow.
all different traditions around the world. On the other windowsills and shelving, we have anything associated with treasure, like gems, crystals, coins, old keys, things that have kind of a symbolic weight, if you will. Then we're looking at buildings, structures, bridges, ladders, fencing. You can see the sand trays there, one for
Yeah.
dry, one for wet. Then there's a shelving unit with people,
Okay, I'm seeing it. Yeah.
and babies. And then in other sections of the room, we have animals, Disney figures, trees, plants, natural materials. So really the sky's the limit when you're collecting for sand play.
Great. And or, for people not familiar with, Sandplay, I want to know about, how did you discover this and a little bit of your backstory as well.
Well, I discovered it in a very unexpected, serendipitous way. Way back when, in 1975, I was a college senior, getting ready to graduate with a degree in elementary education. I had never taken a psychology course in my life, and being a psychotherapist, a child therapist, was just not on my radar. But I needed humanities credits to graduate, and the college offered a course called Dreams, Myth, and Folklore, an
Okay.
introduction to Jungian psychology. And then they offered a 3-month study tour to Zurich, Switzerland.
Wow.
So off I went on this 3-month study tour. And so fortuitous for me was the fact that Dora Kauf was the very, very first presenter to our student group. So we were to be taking courses at the institute there, having a range of private seminars, and also one requirement was that we enter into Jungian analysis for the duration of the study tour. So I remember that moment of first stepping into Dora Kauf's ancient home. Over the doorway is the inscription 1485. So you feel like you're just going back in time into this archetypal world. And just sitting there in her office, listening to her talk about sandplay, I was only 22 years old at that time, and the words went through my mind, my fate has found me.
Wow.
And I left that first encounter with her um, just with an absolute sense of certainty that I would do everything in my power to become a Sandplay therapist. So it was like a course correction that was unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the privilege of beginning my own personal Sandplay therapy process with Dora Kolf, who developed Sandplay.
Wow.
An extraordinary gift.
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit of the background. And also, I want to find out before we continue further of all the benefits and how you're helping so many. Can I just get a little bit of your background? Where did you grow up and how did you even get involved in, becoming a career professional? So tell us a little bit about, your background if you don't mind.
Well, I grew up on a farm in southeastern Lancaster
Oh,
County.
wow.
This is where I live now. This farm has been in our family 7 generations. I'm the fifth. My brother's grandchildren are the seventh, and it's really another gift, so to speak. Um, so out here in rural Pennsylvania, you just I had an unlikely set of parents. Let me say it that way. They were, on the one hand, very salt of the earth kind of people, but they were so open-minded. And my mother, especially, was quite brilliant. In the early 1960s, she was a math teacher and then became a computer programmer when computers filled an entire room.
Mm-hmm.
And my father absolutely supported her in having a
Aw.
career at a time when that was not necessarily a given. I had two brothers, and my father and mother really never imparted the message that I couldn't do anything my brothers could.
Mm-hmm.
So I think because of my mother's profession and just their unequivocal support, it was kind of a given that I could do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And I loved working with children as an adolescent, summer camp counselor, and um, assistant art teacher, and things like that, different internships. So I was really drawn to working with children. And that's why I chose elementary education and then had this opportunity with Dora Kolf, which led me to become first a child psychotherapist.
Fascinating. And here you are. Where did you go to school, if you don't mind me asking?
My undergraduate education was at Antioch College in Yellow
Okay.
Springs, Ohio. And then I went on to get my master's in social work from the University of Denver in Colorado. And then over the decades, I've just continued to pursue the specialty Sandplay training. So there are levels of certification in that. By the early 90s, I achieved certification through Sandplay Therapists of America and the International Society for Sandplay Therapy. And by the mid 90s, I achieved the highest level of teaching membership um, in both of those organizations.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Now, also, let's move on down and talk specifically about the types of things that you're able to help people with. And is it just adults or is it children as well?
Well, Sandplay is unique as a play therapy modality in that it's used with both children and adults. They
Okay.
do use it differently, but Dorokoff originally developed this method for children. Like me, she only expected ever to work with children. But at some point along the way, the parents of her child patients began to express interest, curiosity, and a longing to be able to do this as well. So she experimented with that and found it to be an amazingly effective modality with adults. So, um, as a nonverbal modality, Sandplay really is especially effective in working with anything that is repressed, anything that is out of awareness in the unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and especially extremely painful, disruptive, or traumatic experience. This was sort of intuitively known as Sandplay was being developed.
Mm-hmm.
But when we came to the decade of the 1990s, which is referred to sometimes as the decade of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
when neuroimaging allowed um, a type of brain research, made that possible, a type of research that hadn't been possible before, we really, really learned about how traumatic experience can lodge or register in nonverbal areas of the brain.
Wow.
And so you need a nonverbal key, so to
Okay.
speak, to go in and unlock that and gradually draw that material forward into consciousness. So it is effective for all kinds of issues from depression, anxiety, compulsions, attention deficit, um, for children, conduct disorders or attachment issues or any kind of emotional behavioral issues. Um, it allows material that is not easily accessible with words to come forward and be revealed.
Okay. Wow. And I mean, how many years you've been doing this for now?
I'm shocked when I realize that a little over 45 years.
And let me just ask, you've been doing this, it all has to be in person or during the pandemic? I mean, do people, how did that work? Are you able to do virtual work with people?
Um, Not really, but there's a caveat to that. So the um, the three-dimensional creation that happens in Sandplay, selecting and placing the miniatures and sculpting some kind of landscape in the sand, um, engages the senses, the hands, and the that tactile sense. And that sensory dimension is extremely important in terms
Mm-hmm.
of original Sandplay. It is possible
Yeah.
to do sand play without ever using miniatures, actually, just with shaping and sculpting and interacting with the sand. So it has many, many levels. Um, During the pandemic, I had to go for about 18 months without seeing anyone in person.
Wow.
And I know a number of my colleagues got really creative and developed
Mm-hmm.
some kinds of variations or modifications that fall under the category of virtual or online sandplay. So, for instance, one variation might be if I was working with a sandplay trainee. I actually had some in China who had their own sand trays and own collection. So they would be doing sandplay with the direct tactile engagement with the materials and the miniatures and the figures, and I would be watching on Zoom
Wow.
and tracking that process.
Mm-hmm.
For persons, a lay person who wouldn't have a collection and sand trays in their home, there were some creative variations that for me are more like kind of collage on screen, where you might have a background of a picture of sand, and a person could select images and arrange them,
Mm-hmm.
but without the actual sand. I'm reluctant to call that sand play, but
Yeah.
it's a creative variation that is maybe more like collage work in art therapy.
Amazing. Well, I would love to hear you share some of the stories of specifically the types of things that this can really help people with.
Well, let me see. Um, I'm just going to go with a first story that something that popped into my head. Long, long ago, I worked with a mother who had an extremely difficult trauma history, including emotional neglect and sexual abuse, and then carried that forward into her marriage, where she engaged in an abusive relationship and had a child. And all of that material was deeply, deeply repressed. And she loved her little boy, but she was also terribly ambivalent about him because he looked just like his father. So, as a mother, she carried this inner tension, sense of opposite feelings about her child. So, she first brought her little boy to therapy, and he was only 5 years old, but aggressive to the point of being violent with other children and about to be asked to leave the school that he attended.
Wow.
So lots and lots of anger and aggression. And so in the Sandtray, he made battle after battle after battle and war after war after war. And in the beginning, the final resolution of every picture was everything's dead, everything's gone, everything's destroyed. And so that felt experience um, was his. And I
Yeah.
felt it and witnessing these messy, destructive, chaotic pictures, one after another. But gradually over time, as we worked, then the destruction was less. Maybe a few figures were standing. Then more months went by, and maybe a couple of figures decided to be friends, or a little bridge appeared between the two sides.
Yeah.
And some different kinds of figures began to appear, little caches of treasure and little caches of food. And then gradually the fantasy shifted to, well, they decided to stop fighting, and they decided to share their food and share their treasure. And so this whole sequential drama unfolded over a period of about 18 months to 2 years. And the changes in the visual imagery mirrored the changes in his outer life, um, coping more and more effectively with his anger, his mother learning how to support him through this process. And ultimately, this child went on to be grow up and become a peer counselor by the time he was in high school, and was really reaching out to and supporting others. It took a lot of work, but one of the things I remembered was at a certain juncture in his process, his mother also did some sand play, and she needed to work through her history of trauma and abuse. And a comment she made, I will never forget. She said, "You know, this is like scratching an itch deep, deep inside that you just can't get to
Mm.
any other way." So there's an example of working with acting out behavior, um, depression, anxiety, and trauma.
Ah, well, it's fascinating that you're able to work with people. And normally, how does it work? How many sessions do people need? Does it vary? And how long are their sessions when they come in to do this type of sand play therapy?
Well, typically sessions are, like regular psychotherapy sessions, with children, 50 minutes to an hour. In my practice with adults, I extend adult sand play sessions to 90 minutes. I just feel like they need more creative time. That's a time increment that works for me. Many of my colleagues limit their sessions to an hour. And everyone asks, how long will this process take? And it's really impossible to say. But I will say, in my practice over the years, most of the persons I've seen have been between 6 months to several years. And with children, usually by 3 to 6 months, you can begin to see some real change and stabilization of change. But there are always exceptions. There are those who resolve something more quickly and others who take a much longer time.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. And we still have plenty more time left to speak. What else in particular would you want to make sure you cover for today, being that it is your first show? And again, we are learning so much about this.
Well, I had in mind to talk a little bit more about how Sandplay was developed. So I want to go back to an individual called Dr. Margaret Lowenfeld, who was a British physician. She worked with refugees in the wake of the Russo-Polish War in 1918. And so she encountered severely traumatized individuals, especially children, and became fascinated with how some of these children were able to survive and thrive while others did not, and especially that they could not speak about their experience. So this led her to establish a child clinic in London,
Mm-hmm.
1920s, and she called it a clinic for children with nervous disorders and their mothers. Anyway, if we think about the history of play therapy, it's just over 100 years old. This whole field was blossoming and opening up in the 1920s. And we have seminal figures like Melanie Klein or Anna Freud, just real pioneers in the field of play therapy. And Lowenfeld was at that same time period. So what I wanted to describe is that she had in her playroom all the kinds of things that were typical in a play therapy room: dollhouse, puzzles, games, art materials, blocks. She also had a sand and water table for
Ooh,
sensory work.
okay.
And on the opposite side of the room, she had a little box called that the children called the Wonder Box, and it was full of little things. So she never thought to pair these items, but what she saw was that over and over again, children would go get the Wonder Box, bring it to the sand table, and use the little toys, buttons, spools, stones, shells, whatever was in there, use those items to create scenes
Okay.
in the sand tray, which they called worlds. And so I love this story because it really highlights how Sandplay was first inspired just by the spontaneous play of children.
Wow.
So I don't know how much time we have here to keep going, but
We well, we only have, let's see, we got 2 minutes left. Sorry.
let me just maybe finish about
Sure.
Lowenfeld. She had the wisdom to really um, see and uh, understand how important this activity was. And so she expanded the collection of miniatures and she studied and did a lot of research about what was happening with children using these miniatures. And, this became one of her primary tools for really working with children who could not find the words to speak to their experience or could not find those words initially. So when children set up what at that time they called a world or a scene, they might have a story to go with it or
Hmm.
they might not. Um, so many times I would ask a child, is there a story that goes with it? And they would say, nah, I don't know. And then I would just let that go.
Yeah.
And I'm careful to ask, is there a story, not what's the story, to really give them a sense of permission to decline.
Mm-hmm.
But on the opposite end of the spectrum are the children who are just, it's a constant stream of consciousness fantasy all the way through. So maybe next time we can talk about how Dora Kalf met Margaret Lowenfeld and carried this work forward in a different direction.
Beautiful. Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's great getting to know you. Would you mind sharing how we can reach out to you, please?
Well, my website is being developed at the moment, but I can be reached by email at bettycjackson@mac.com, mac.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure getting to know you. Thank you for the tour. Thank you for enlightening us. And I hope we get to connect again next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day. And to all of our listeners and viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share. This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.